Hello, I'm State Representative Mike Dovilla from the 18th House District. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm your host, Mike Ditto. With us today we have State Representative Mike Dovilla, who serves the 18th House District, which includes Berea, North Royalton, Olmsted Falls, Olmsted Township, and Strongsville in Cuyahoga County. Representative, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You've been here for just a few months now in your first term as state representative. Tell us how you got here and what your life is like outside of the state legislature.
Absolutely. Well, the big thing I'm still doing in the world outside the legislature is serving as an officer in the United States Navy. I'm an intel guy and had the opportunity back in 2007 to serve for a year over in Baghdad, Iraq, working on counter-IED intelligence. And then I'm also a small business owner. I have a consulting firm that does some work on strategic issues, and for a time was working on government policy issues and some other consulting areas as well.
So what has the first 4 or 5 months in the state legislature been like for you? Has it been busy?
Just a little bit. It's been a very fast start, and some of my experience previously in government was mainly around the federal space. I worked with Senator Voinovich for a while and in 3 different federal agencies. So this is really my first time spending any substantive time in Columbus. But even for folks who've been around here quite a bit longer than I have, my understanding is that this is just off to a really rapid start this year. And in some ways, I think we're trying to squeeze 4 years of work, I think, into what feels like 4 months here in terms of the legislative production that we've had right off the bat.
So how has your work here just in the State House been different from what you did for the federal government? Can you tell us a little bit about what you did there?
Sure. Well, some of it's similar, actually. With Senator Voinovich, I worked on federal personnel issues and management issues primarily. And here in the legislature, I serve on the State Government Elections Committee, among others. And our work on that committee has been focused on performance audits and a number of different areas to kind of get government working more effectively for Ohioans once again.
In addition to your service on the State Government Elections Committee, what other committees have you been appointed to for this session?
Well, on State Government Elections, I also am on the redistricting subcommittee, first of all. So that's a subcommittee of 5 members out of the 99 who will work on helping to redraw the congressional districts after this most recent census. And then I also serve on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax writing committee for the legislature, and on economic and small business development. And that's really an area that I'm very interested in terms of getting job creation and economic development going for the state once again.
And tell us a little bit about the redistricting committee. That's something that is not usually around in the General Assembly, happens every 10 years. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that you've done so far or that you're about to do.
Sure, and we've been, as you know, busy with the budget and some other major initiatives, but we're starting to move now toward that redistricting process, which needs to be done toward the end of this year. And we'll be setting up a series of hearings around the state, is my understanding, to kind of get the input of as many Ohioans as we possibly can. And then that process will be underway. Unfortunately, we lose 2 seats this time around, and this is really, I think, in some ways a testament to the direction that Ohio has been headed for the last 20 or 30 years. Back in the 1970s, we had 24 districts here in Ohio. We'll go down to 16 this time. We're one of only 2 states in the country to lose 2 districts. And so we have a process ahead of us that will be, first and foremost, a legal and fair process for redrawing our districts. And, but it'll certainly be a very interesting process, and I'm privileged just to have the chance to serve as one of those 5 on that particular subcommittee that gets to work on this from the very beginning.
It sounds like that'll be a pretty interesting committee to be doing some very serious work on. So what inspires a Navy veteran and a small business owner to run for state representative?
Well, you know, it's a situation in the state that has been, I think, heading in the wrong direction for a while. We've lost 400,000 jobs just over the last 4 years, more than that over the last decade. And I kind of got to the end of both the 2006 cycle when I ran for Congress in the 10th Congressional District, and then the 2008 cycle where I helped some other candidates, and we also took a licking that year on our side of the aisle. And I was kind of sitting down and said, you know, it's time to get back into this once again and see if I can play a role in trying to get the state back on the right track. And ultimately, we took 21 months. We knocked on 15,927 doors, not that anyone's counting.
No.
And we managed to, I think, get out a good positive message that we want to get Ohio working again. And we meant 2 things by that. One, we want to get Ohioans back to work. And two, we want to get Ohio government working more efficiently and effectively for Ohioans once again. And really, those two areas, I think, have been some of the most robust in terms of our legislative agenda right off the bat, with the Jobs Ohio package, the budget that was just passed out of the House, and performance audits and some other things to really straighten around the regulatory framework in the state to move us in the right direction.
A lot of people may or may not know that there are 99 House districts in the state of Ohio. What are the issues that are facing your district right now?
Well, I think not unlike other districts around the state, it's primarily the issue of economic development and job creation. So that's been the thing we've tried to focus on the most right out of the gate. But additionally, I represent a suburban district near Cleveland, and public education is certainly a major issue for the folks around my area. People choose to live in cities that have good school districts, and we're fortunate in our area to have 3 districts out of the 4 I represent that are at the excellent level as determined by the Ohio Department of Education, and one of them, Olmsted Falls, is excellent with distinction. And so I've been trying to focus through the budget process in particular on how to mitigate the cuts that all parts of state government and local government are unfortunately coming under the knife right now due to the $8 billion structural imbalance in our budget that we were left with at the end of the last couple of years. And so we're trying to mitigate those cuts and help those local entities and local school districts really be able to move forward through this rough patch over the next couple of years into the years beyond that.
In addition to the legislation that focuses on jobs and economic development, you held a press conference earlier this week on another piece of legislation that you're working on that sounds like it's a pretty near and dear to your heart issue. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about it. I think it's House Bill 224.
Absolutely. And it was just introduced on Tuesday. I had the privilege of partnering with Michael Stinziano, representative from the 25th District in the Columbus area, to introduce what's called UMOVA legislation, Uniform Military Overseas Voting Assistance. And this is a process that in many ways is governed at the federal level, but we're trying to implement more effectively here in the state of Ohio. During my year over in Baghdad, I was actually disenfranchised as a voter in the municipal elections in 2007, and I indicated that if I ever had the chance to try and improve the process and ensure that ballots and applications for absentee voting could be more efficiently delivered to the service member or other overseas voter and then returned back to the Board of Elections to make sure the ballots counted, that I would do that. And so our bill provides for either email or other internet delivery of those applications and for the ballots to be returned more efficiently.
In addition to that, there are a few other legislative initiatives that you're working on, and one that you and I were discussing earlier at House Bill 144, dealing with the Small Business Resource Center. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, and this is one of a number of bills that was in the Future of Ohio Jobs package from the 128th General Assembly, and I've been working very closely with Representative Nan Baker, my neighbor to the north in the 16th District.
Not too far away.
Absolutely, from Westlake, and she's the chair of our Economic and Small Business Development Committee. This was one of her bills from last time around that she asked me to partner with in the 129th. And one of the issues that was brought to our attention by small business owners around the state and around our districts was that the Ohio Business Gateway, which is the online business portal where people really go for their first contact electronically for state government, is a pretty unwieldy site. And we're trying to find ways to clean that up, whether it's through this legislative action or at least using this bill to kind of push the administrative side of the House to make some improvements to it, possibly shift it over to the Secretary of State's site where a lot of the filings take place anyway in terms of starting a business. When I created my company a number of years ago, had to file my paperwork through the Secretary's office. And so it's really just a way of kind of streamlining and making more efficient the process for either starting a small business in Ohio or expanding one.
Now, you actually have been working with constituents in your district on an issue that has prompted some legislative action by you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you're headed with House Bill 215.
Sure. I was at the Olmsted Falls Senior Center back on St. Patrick's Day. Had a very nice lunch of corned beef and all the Irish fixings that day.
Sounds good right now.
It was, absolutely. But it was brought to my attention by Kathy Lowry, who is the Senior Center Director for the City of Olmsted Falls, that elder abuse is a real issue here in Ohio and around the United States that often goes unrecognized. And about 6 years ago, the World Health Organization, which is an agency of the United Nations, established World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And so we've introduced a bill here in the legislature now that will designate June 15th of each year as Elder Abuse Awareness Day in the state of Ohio. And this was perhaps the easiest thing we've been able to do so far, but I was able just very recently to offer sponsor testimony in the Health and Aging Committee, and the committee reported the bill out at the very same hearing. So I'm not sure how frequently that happens around here, but I think
rarely,
yeah.
rarely.
But this is something we could really build, I think, good bipartisan support on right away. And it's a good example, I think, of representative government in action, where we get an idea from a constituent and then put it in place in the form of legislation as quickly as we can.
It's no secret that the budget has been the primary issue that has been facing the legislature for the last several months now. The bill is passed out of the House and is over in the Senate. Anything that you'd like to highlight from the state budget as far as what the Republican caucus did or what the committees have done, and just anything in general you'd like to talk about on the budget?
Sure. Well, I think the big point, Mike, on the budget is that we managed to take an $8 billion structural imbalance or a deficit in our budget and erase that without raising taxes. And that by itself, when you take a look at the last 2 years with one-time stimulus dollars, a lot of smoke and mirrors and some other things that were put in place to kind of patch over the problem that should have really been resolved in 2009. We've taken this thing on this time, and I think inserted some really creative solutions, whether in the areas of privatization, cuts in some areas that have been needed, and in others that perhaps are a little harder to stomach at this point. But I think everyone coming into this recognized that we needed to balance this budget in a way that was responsible, and that the last thing that would be good for the state of Ohio at this point in time would be to raise taxes. We look to Illinois as an example of a different way of doing things here in the Midwest, and they raised their individual and their corporate taxes, I think, around 65% in response to their budget deficit. We've taken a different approach here that I think will stimulate economic development and job creation. More specifically, as I mentioned before, I've been focused on education within this particular budget due to its specific impact on the suburban type of school districts that I represent. So the one thing we did was we got a 20% cap on the reduction in state aid into the budget for all school districts across the state. We're also working now to try and get a 20% cap on the total reduction, not just the state aid portion, but on the additional payments that come in, such as from the tangible personal property tax, the hold harmless payments that in districts like Berea and others around suburban Cleveland and other major cities in the state have a real impact in terms of the revenues that they bring in. And one other thing in the way of education that I put in the budget, and this is something we were recognized for during the campaign last year, actually in our endorsement by one of the papers, was education funding. And so we've inserted an amendment in the budget that will require each year every school district to report back to the General Assembly and to the Department of Education the percentage of dollars that stay in the administrative overhead functions of schools and the percentage that go into the classrooms. My take on that is the more dollars we can drive into classrooms where they're helping our children, the better, and the less that we can have an administrative overhead, and that we can try and move in the right direction with efficiency. That's the right thing to do.
So a 4,000-page budget over in the Senate now for them to deal with, and now that that's done, and now you have other issues that you're focusing on until the budget comes back. Maybe you could tell your constituents about what a typical day is like for you here in Columbus.
I'm not sure there's any typical day. That's the thing. Although they tend to follow, I guess, a pattern around here.
Sure.
I'm typically in the office by 7:30 or 8 each morning, try and get through some reading and some correspondence best we can, and then I'll typically have caucus with our party, followed by legislative session and then committees. And the committees that I'm on have been doing some really heavy lifting, and so it's not rare that we'll take 2 or 3 or 4 more hours in a committee hearing in the afternoon to go over a big issue.
So you've been here for about 5 months or so. What do you enjoy the most about the work that you're doing?
The biggest thing that I enjoy is really getting back to the district and working with constituents directly. And as you mentioned, the one bill that we have on elder abuse is a good example, I think, of legislation that follows directly on a constituent bringing an issue to my attention. But the really neat thing is to be able to go out on the weekends and present a commendation to a new group of Eagle Scouts or Gold Award winners among the Girl Scouts, the Senior of the Year, Volunteer Award, those types of things. Because that's where the rubber really meets the road with what we do here to represent our constituents.
So you have about a 2.5-hour distance or so between your home, I think, and the State House.
Yeah, about 2 hours.
Okay, so your constituents, if they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, I believe in transparency in government, and my cell phone is my lifeline to the world outside of my office phone here, and that I'm happy to give that number. It's 216-280-8720. And that's my cell and my home phone, so it's the easiest way to get to me. And And a lot of folks have actually commented that, you know, it's nice to have a representative who is as responsive and transparent as I've tried to be and will continue to be.
That's good. And we've got your office email and your office phone number and mailing address on the screen here for the viewers to see as well. So Representative Dovilla, thank you so much for joining us here today on Ohio in Focus. We appreciate it. Hope you'll come back sometime.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure.
Very good. And thanks to all of you. You've been watching Ohio in Focus, the program that brings state government to you. Thanks for joining us.